Salam, peace be upon you. My name is Muhammad Layak Siddiqui, the father Holophase. This part is the complete picture of episode 15, the foundational essence of change. Not change of position, not change of energy, not change of a field value. The thing those phrases quietly assume. What it means for anything to change at all. What becoming is. When we refuse to treat time as a magic river and refuse to treat motion as an unexplained miracle. This is a revolutionary attempt because it does something no previous project dared to do with full operational honesty. It does not build a story about the world. It builds a public machine that decides which claims about change are even allowed to exist. It replaces metaphysical comfort with certification. It replaces persuasion with replay. It replaces "it happened" with "here is the signed object that makes this claim public." To see why this matters, we have to name the crisis. For over 2,000 years, change has been the ghost that haunts every philosophy and every physics. Heraclitus made it poetry. You cannot step into the same river twice. He saw the world as flux, but flux was a vision, not a definition. Parmenides replied with brutality, "Change is impossible. What is cannot become what is not." His logic was sharp, and it cut. If change is real, then non-being must be something, and thought collapses. Aristotle attempted a repair. He invented an entire grammar of becoming, potentiality and actuality, and for a time it held, but it held by introducing explanatory nouns that were not themselves operationally grounded. It was a metaphysical bridge, not a public protocol. Then modern science arrived and promised to end mythology. But here is the uncomfortable truth. Modern science never defines change either. It parameterized it. Newton wrote change as derivatives with respect to absolute time. He gave us astonishing predictive power, but he also confessed his own smuggling. Absolute time flows equably without relation to anything external. That sentence is not a theorem. It is a myth written in Latin. Newton's equations make sense because time is granted as a primitive coordinate before any certification begins. Einstein seemed to remove the myth by geometrizing it. Time became a coordinate in spacetime. Change became a world line. Dynamics became geometry. Yet the core problem remained. Change itself was still assumed as the idea of traversal along a parameter. We gained elegance, but we did not gain a definition of becoming. The block universe even made the discomfort official. Maybe nothing becomes, everything simply is. But then, why do we experience change? The debate split into metaphysical camps, not public test suites. In the 20th century, the crisis deepened. Quantum mechanics presented change as unitary evolution, interrupted by collapse, yet could not say what collapse is, when it happens, or whether it is physical or epistemic. Many worlds removes collapse by letting everything branch, but then probabilities become mysterious. Why this measure? Why these weights? Bohmian mechanics adds trajectories, but then hidden variables enter. Copenhagen appeals to measurement, but measurement is never defined in physical terms. It is a boundary word that functions like magic. Thermodynamics offered a different axis. Change points in one direction because entropy increases. But entropy itself depends on coarse graining, and coarse graining depends on what distinctions you allow yourself to track. The arrow of time was explained by assuming a special low entropy past, which is not an explanation, but a restatement plus a cosmological miracle. Quantum gravity then delivered the hardest blow. At the Planck scale, the very notion of before and after may be undefined. If time is emergent, then every theory that treated time as fundamental was building on an unearned primitive. So here is the diagnosis. Every major tradition either denies change, narrates change, or smuggles change through a primitive parameter. None builds change as a public object with an operational constitution. That is what episode 15 does. Episode 14 gave us the first half of the revolution. It defined what a public state is without importing spacetime, dynamics, or semantics. It installed the public compiler. From the sole primitive comparability field phi-x to S1 and its lawful derivatives, finite jets, plus topological closure tokens, holonomy, defects, or charges, it extracted what can be certified inside finite windows, with passports, ceilings, uncertainty budgets, invariance tests, and audit trails. It taught us the brutal honesty of finite access. Infinite depth exists, but we only certify finite sentences. Episode 15 is the second half. It defines what it means for one public state to be related to another in a way that deserves the name change, without importing time as a substance. Here is the single sentence that everything in Phi 1 expands. Change is a certified relation between Phi Zero certified state packages across typed adjacency, produced by register transformers, enforced by gates, and written to a ledger. Every word is a firewall. Certified relation, not I saw it, not it seems, not it must have happened, but a replayable object that any team can check. Phi Zero certified state packages, not raw reality, not private experience, but what survives compilation. Typed adjacency, not an assumed next, but a proven interface that makes comparison legal. Register transformers, not free evolution, but declared law operators with guardrails and tests. Enforced by gates, not persuasive explanation, but executable legality checks. Written to a ledger, not floating claims, but permanent public records that can be revoked if their dependencies fail. This is the core philosophical inversion. The world is not what happens. The public world is what can be certified. Change is not flow. Public change is what can be ledgered. Now we build the complete picture. Start with the atom of runtime reality, the state package. A state package is the only legal public referent for what is the case inside the window. It is not a snapshot of metaphysical reality. It is a compiled object with fields that carry the full honesty of how it was produced. A passport, pi, w. What the window is permitted to claim and under what measurement contract. A domain, d, w. What region is included and what is excised, with boundary typing and colors. A ceiling and max, w. How deep the derivative tree is legally accessible here. An uncertainty budget, r, w. How much error is honestly carried. A finite jet, j and phi, d. The certified structure sentence. A defect ledger, sigma, w. Holonomy, winding, charges, linking, topological closure tokens. An invariant basis k. Gauge-safe observables that survive phi to phi plus constant and other invariances. An audit trail. Seeds, protocols, conditions, replay artifacts, and refusal logs. A state package is hashable and canonicalizable. If it cannot be hashed and replayed, it is not public state. This alone already transforms philosophy. For centuries, debates about change were debates about what is really there. Phi Zero says, really there is not a starting point. Public reality begins when you can certify and replay. Now we face the moment where every previous theory smuggled. How do we go from one state to another? The first discipline is adjacency. We do not allow the word next unless it has a type and a proof. Adjacency is the replacement for next moment. It is not temporal, it is structural and operational. Two state packages are adjacent if there exists a certified relation between their windows that makes comparison legal. There are different adjacency classes because there are different ways windows can be related without smuggling a clock. Overlap adjacency. The windows share a certified overlap region, and their invariants agree within uncertainty. Refinement adjacency. One window refines another, more detail, in a way that is explicitly tracked. Scale adjacency. A coarse-graining interface is declared. What is discarded, what is preserved. Transport adjacency. One window is related to another by a certified transport procedure. Boundary adjacency. Two windows meet along a typed boundary or caller interface. Adjacency must be proved. AdjacencyProof is an object with evidence and a hash. If no AdjacencyProof exists, the honest answer is undefined. Not unknown, not maybe, not it probably happened. Undefined in the language. Already we have removed a huge portion of mythology. Most human talk about change assumes all states can be stitched into one narrative stream. Phi 1 refuses that. It says, show your stitching. Now we define the heart, the UpdateCertificate. An UpdateCertificate is the unit of public change. It is not a description of becoming. It is becoming made into a public object. It includes the hash of s from and the hash of s2, the AdjacencyProof hash, the transformer identifier and version, residual and acceptance reports, uncertainty propagation trace, GateReports, audit digest, and ledger pointers. This single object is the replacement for then it changed. If you say the system changed, Phi 1 replies, show the certificate. If you cannot show it, you are not making a public claim. You are telling a story. Now we define what produces an update, the transformer. A transformer is where laws live. But in Phi 1, a law is not an equation written on paper and interpreted by tradition. A law is a registered operator with declared scope, declared inputs, declared obligations, and declared failure modes. A transformer must declare its input signature, what parts of the state package it reads, which invariants, which jet orders, which defect tokens, its domain guards, where it is allowed to apply, its sealing requirements, what derivative depth it requires, its invariance obligations, what must remain invariant, gauge safety, cut safety, its residual tests, how we judge whether its outputs are acceptable, its uncertainty propagation rule, how it pushes uncertainty forward honestly, its audit recipe, what artifacts must be logged for replay, its refusal behavior, what it outputs when it fails, and what downgrade is suggested. Transformers compose only when their types match and the composition preserves gate obligations. Two different transformer stacks can be tested for equivalence. Do they yield equivalent outputs within uncertainty? This is not just technical, it is philosophical hygiene. It prevents the old disease where theories explain everything by quietly changing interpretation rules when convenient. In Phi 1, interpretation is not free. It is typed, registered, and audited. Now we install the immune system, the 8 gates. Before any certificate becomes real, it must survive 8 independent checks. These are not rhetorical standards, they are enforcement engines. G1, token legality. Are you even speaking the allowed alphabet? G2. Adjacency legality. Did you prove the adjacency type you rely on? G3. Recompilability. Can Phi Zero recompile the output state from its audit trail? G4. Invariance safety. Does the claim survive gate shifts, cut choices, and allowed reparameterizations? G5. Sealing honesty. Did you violate derivative sealings or identifiability limits? G6. Uncertainty adequacy. Did you underprice uncertainty or pretend noise is motion? G7. Audit sufficiency. Can another team replay the entire procedure and reach the same certificate decision? G8. Primitive ban. Did you smuggle time, metric, force, probability as law, energy as stuff, observer choice, or meaning as primitive causal nouns? These gates are the reason Phi 1 is revolutionary. In the history of science, we have had methods, norms, peer review, and mathematical consistency. But we have rarely had a formally installed refusal engine that makes no as public and as structured as yes. Phi 1 does. Now we make the refusal posture explicit. When a gate fails, Phi 1 does not simply discard the attempt. It issues a refusal certificate, a public object that names which gate failed, cites the evidence, and proposes a downgrade, a weaker claim that can be certified. These refusals go to a negative archive and are never deleted. They become the memory of integrity. If later a dependency is found invalid, a revocation dossier propagates through the certificate graph, pruning claims and recording the impact. This solves a deep epistemic problem. In ordinary science, failed paths vanish into notebooks, and the public record becomes biased toward success. Phi 1 forces failure to be part of the public structure. Now we can define a universe in Phi 1. A universe is not first a place, not first a spacetime, not first a metaphysical totality. A universe instance is a connected certification graph. Nodes are state packages, hashes. Edges are valid update certificates. If there is no chain between two states, they are not publicly in the same instance. If the graph splits, the honest answer is separate components. No forced story. From this graph, we derive order. We do not start with time. We derive a partial order from certificate dependency. S1 precedes S2 if a valid chain exists from S1 to S2. Before and after become graph properties. Cycles trigger audits. Either an edge is invalid, an adjacency was mistyped, or the phenomenon reveals a deeper structure. But we never resolve cycles by declaring time. We resolve them by certification. This is the core philosophical conquest. Order without time. Now we can see how the later pillars of episode 15 emerge naturally once the certificate architecture exists. Interaction becomes a failure of factorization. In old language, systems interact via forces. In Phi 1, interaction is certified when an update cannot be factorized into independent updates on subsystems, given declared partitions and interfaces. If every attempt to separate the paperwork fails for gate-stable reasons, interaction is real at that level. If it can be factored, then coupling was a story, not a public fact. Constraints and equations become co-certifiability conditions. In old language, laws are equations that nature obeys. In Phi 1, constraints are the relations that must hold for certificates to exist under a transformer family and adjacency typing. Equations are not assumed. They are extracted as survival conditions under the gates. Branching emerges from ceilings and uncertainty. In old metaphysics, branching is mysticism or many worlds drama. In Phi 1, branching appears when certification cannot uniquely continue due to finite ceilings and honest uncertainty. Multiple, non-equivalent successor states may each admit valid certificates. Determinism becomes a claim that must be proven as uniqueness under ceilings, not assumed as nature's habit. Probability becomes a typed measure over branches. Probability is not imported as a primitive randomness law. It is a registered assignment rule over a branch set with explicit scope, invariance conditions, calibration provenance, and refusal cases. Probability without scope is illegal. Probability that changes under gauge is illegal. This keeps the framework from replacing time mythology with chance mythology. Coarse graining becomes a declared interface. Macro descriptions do not appear by magic. They become legal only through registered coarse graining interfaces that explicitly state what information is discarded and what is preserved, how uncertainty transforms, and how ceilings shift. Without that declaration, macro talk is a hallucination. The error emerges from information loss and recompilability limits. Irreversibility is not a substance called time's error. It is the certified consequence of many-to-one coarse graining combined with finite ceilings. The reverse update fails because the information required to recompile is not present. Error claims must come with reverse attempt refusal dossiers. Otherwise, they are stories. Objects emerge as stability certificates. A thing is not a primitive particle. It is a persistent equivalence class under update chains, within scope and under declared coarse grainings. Objects without stability proofs are illegal nouns. This prevents the old habit of smuggling ontology under common words. Causality becomes certified intervention. Influence is not a metaphysical arrow or a force. It is the certified fact that under legal interventions, which are themselves type transformers, reachable branch sets or constraints differ in gate-stable ways. Counterfactuals become branch comparisons, not what would have happened stories. Energy becomes ledger accounting. Energy is not a fluid. It is a certified bookkeeping quantity attached to update certificates under transformer families, additive under composition, and conserved within declared scope when certification supports it. Energy claims require ledger rules and audit recipes. Completeness becomes falsifiable. Phi 1 does not claim omniscience. It claims something sharper and more honest. Any publicly certifiable change, meaning any phenomenon that produces repeatable Phi-Nor states and admits adjacency typing, can be represented either as a valid certificate chain or as a principled refusal with diagnostics. If you present a public change that cannot be certified and cannot be refused with clear reasons, the framework is falsified. This is a different kind of ambition than traditional theory building. It is not, I derived the universe. It is, I built the runtime infrastructure for any public universe. Now we can state the full essence of change in one coherent picture, without poetry, though it will sound poetic, because reality is beautiful when it becomes disciplined. Change is not a flow. Change is not a motion through a medium. Change is not a metaphysical event that happens in time. Change is the existence of a lawful, replayable, public object that connects two lawful, replayable, public objects. A state is what survives compilation. A next is what survives AdjacencyProof. A law is what survives registration and gates. A change is what survives certification. A universe is what survives ledger connectivity. An order is what survives dependency extraction. An object is what survives stability tests. An arrow is what survives reverse attempt refusal. A causal claim is what survives intervention comparison. A probability is what survives typed measure registration. An energy claim is what survives ledger accounting. And everything that does not survive becomes not wrong, but refused, publicly, with reasons. This is why it is revolutionary in the history of thought. Heraclitus saw flux, but could not make it public. Parmenides denied change because the language of being could not host it without contradiction. Aristotle introduced categories, but not certificates. Newton gave a calculus of change, but paid for it with an undefined absolute time. Einstein traded absolute time for geometry, but still assumed parameterized evolution. Quantum mechanics split change into unitary law and measurement magic. Thermodynamics invoked entropy, but leaned on unearned boundary conditions. Phi 1 does something else. It does not take change as primitive and try to describe it. It defines change as a certified relation produced by a public machine. It turns becoming into infrastructure. And notice what this does to philosophy. It does not defeat philosophy by ignoring it. It fulfills philosophy's deepest demand. Make your concepts accountable. Every metaphysical dispute about change becomes a demand for artifacts. If you claim there is change, show the update certificates. If you claim there is time, show where it appears without being smuggled. If you claim there is causality, show intervention certificates. If you claim there is probability, show measure registration. If you claim there is an observer causing collapse, you are outside Phi 1. You must cross into Phi 1.5 with new typed machinery and new gates. Meaning is not denied, it is firewalled. This is also why the attempt is scientifically radical. It is not another equation competing with old equations. It is a standard for what counts as an equation at all. It is a compiler grade for change claims. So we close the complete picture with the same discipline we began with. We do not tell stories about time flowing. We certify relations between Phi Zero compiled state packages. Every claim must compile to paperwork. State packages plus AdjacencyProof plus transformer plus GateReport plus UpdateCertificate plus ledger entry. If it cannot compile, we refuse, publicly, with a refusal certificate. This is the discipline that makes science infrastructure. And now you understand episode 15 in one breath. It is the runtime grammar of public change. It is the machine that turns "it happened" into "here is the certificate." It is the architecture that makes becoming auditable without time mythology. It is the first attempt to treat change itself not as a feeling, not as a parameter, not as a story, but as a public object with a constitution. From here, each part of episode 15 will simply install one module of that constitution. In slow motion, with examples, refusals, downgrades, and ledger entries, until the listener can feel in their bones what a universe is when it is not narrated but certified. That is the foundational essence of change. Always, peace be with you.